Please let me go. 4. Cowboys tied and mocked the obese girl, then mountain man, cut off her chains. The Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly on the small wagon train crawling across the desert in late August 1879. 3 families and a handful of single travelers all heading west toward California, drawn by promises of gold and land and fresh starts. Among them was 23-year-old Ruth Brennan, traveling alone, or rather traveling under the protection of 4 cowboys hired as trail guards, Cole Mackey and his 3 companions, Dwight, Roscoe, and Pete. Ruth had paid $30, her entire savings, for passage with the wagon train and the supposed safety of armed escorts. Her father had died 6 months earlier in Kansas, leaving her with nothing but debts and a choice: marry the butcher who'd generously offered to take her despite her size, or head west and try to find work in the boom towns. She'd chosen west. Now, 3 weeks into the journey, she was beginning to think the butcher might have been the better option. "Ruth, get over here!" Cole's voice cracked across the midday camp like a whip. "These horses need watering, and you're the only one not doing nothing." Ruth wiped sweat from her face and hurried toward the makeshift corral where the spare horses were tied. Her dress, already stained and torn from the journey, clung to her substantial frame, and her feet ached in boots that had worn through at the toes. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, taking the heavy water buckets. "Yes, sir," Roscoe mimicked in a high voice, making his companions laugh. "Look how she waddles, like a duck. Hey, Ruth, quack for us." The laughter grew louder. Ruth kept her head down and focused on hauling water from the wagon to the horses. It had been like this since the second day of travel. Constant mockery, cruel jokes, deliberate humiliation. The 4 cowboys seemed to view tormenting her as their primary entertainment. And the other travelers? They turned away, pretended not to notice, or worse, they laughed along, grateful the target wasn't them. "You know what I think," Pete drawled, leaning against the wagon wheel and watching Ruth work. "I think we should have charged her double. She's eaten for 2 people at least." "At least," Dwight agreed. "Maybe 3. You see how much she put away at breakfast?" "She barely ate anything," one of the other women, Mrs. Henderson, said quietly from her own wagon. "Leave the girl alone." "Oh, Mrs. Henderson's defending the fat girl," Cole called out mockingly. "Maybe you 2 can share clothes." "Oh, wait, Ruth's dresses would fit 3 of you." The camp erupted in cruel laughter. Mrs. Henderson fell silent, not willing to draw more attention to herself. Ruth finished watering the horses, her face burning with shame. She retreated to her small tent, really just a canvas sheet stretched over a frame, and sat in the stifling heat, trying not to cry. She'd made a terrible mistake. Coming west had been foolish, but going back was impossible. She'd spent her money on passage, had nothing to return to, nowhere to go. She was trapped. That evening, as the wagon train made camp near a dry creek bed, things took a darker turn. Ruth was preparing her meager supper, beans and hardtack, when Cole approached with his 3 friends. They'd been drinking. She could smell the whiskey from 10 feet away. "Ruth," Cole said, his voice falsely friendly, "we need to talk about your passage fee." "I paid $30 in full before we left." "That was for standard passage. But see, we've been thinking. You're using more resources than we estimated. Extra water for the horses you ride, extra food from the communal supplies. I brought my own food. And you're slowing us down. Cole continued as if she hadn't spoken. "All that weight on the wagon, it's wearing out the wheels faster. We figure you owe another $20. Ruth's stomach dropped. "I don't have $20. I don't have any money." "Well, that's a problem." Cole's false friendliness vanished. "Because if you can't pay, you can't stay with the train. We'll have to leave you here." "Leave me?" Ruth looked around wildly at the desert surrounding them, miles of nothing in every direction. "I'll die out here." "Should have thought of that before taking passage you couldn't afford." "I can afford it. I paid what we agreed." "And now the price has changed." Cole stepped closer, and Ruth could see the cruelty in his eyes. This wasn't about money. It was about power, about finding someone weaker to torment. "So what's it gonna be, fat girl? You got $20, or do we leave you for the buzzards?" "Please," Ruth whispered, hating the desperation in her voice. "Please, I'll work harder. I'll do extra chores, anything. Just don't leave me here." "Anything?" Roscoe's smile was nasty. "Well, now, maybe we can work out some other arrangement." "Roscoe, shut it," Cole snapped, though he looked thoughtful. "Tell you what, Ruth, we'll let you stay with the train, but you're going to work off that debt. You'll do all the water hauling, all the camp setup and breakdown, all the cooking for us four, and you'll do it without complaining. Deal?" It wasn't a deal. It was indentured servitude. But what choice did she have? "Deal," Ruth whispered. "Good girl." Cole patted her head like she was a dog. "Oh, and one more thing. Just to make sure you don't try to run off in the night." He pulled out a length of chain and a padlock. Before Ruth could react, he'd wrapped the chain around her wrist and locked it to the wagon wheel. "This is how horses get secured," he said conversationally. "Seems fitting. You can't. This isn't." "This isn't what?" Cole's voice turned dangerous. "Legal. Who's going to stop us? You going to complain to someone?" He looked around the camp where other travelers were pointedly ignoring what was happening. "Nobody cares about you, Ruth. Nobody wants you here. You're lucky we're letting you stay at all." He walked away, laughing with his friends. Ruth pulled at the chain, but it was solid iron, the padlock secure. She was truly trapped now, not just by circumstance, but by actual physical restraint. That night, chained to the wagon wheel like an animal, Ruth cried silently into her hands. She'd thought her life in Kansas had been rock bottom, but she'd been wrong. This was rock bottom, and she had no idea how to climb back up. The abuse escalated daily. Cole and his friends seemed to delight in finding new ways to humiliate Ruth. They made her haul water in the blazing afternoon heat, laughing when she stumbled under the weight of full buckets. They gave her the worst food scraps and complained loudly when she ate them. They woke her before dawn with kicks to her sleeping form, demanding coffee and breakfast, and always, always the chain. They kept her locked to the wagon wheel at night and during the midday rest stops. When they traveled, they'd chain her wrist to the wagon bed, forcing her to walk alongside rather than ride. "Can't have you running off," Cole said with a grin. "You owe us, remember?" The other travelers watched with varying degrees of discomfort, but no one intervened. Mrs. Henderson tried once more, approaching Cole to suggest this treatment was excessive. "You want to take her place?" Cole asked pleasantly. "Because I'm happy to chain you up instead." Mrs. Henderson retreated. After that, no one said anything. Ruth felt herself breaking. The physical exhaustion was crushing. She was working from before dawn until after dark, getting perhaps 4 hours of sleep a night. The constant humiliation wore at her soul. And the chain was a symbol of her worthlessness, a physical manifestation of how far she'd fallen. On the 17th day of her captivity, things came to a head. They'd camped at a rare water source, a spring emerging from rocks in an otherwise barren landscape. The horses needed watering, and Ruth was tasked with hauling bucket after bucket from the spring to the makeshift corral. She was on her 20th trip, her arms screaming with exhaustion, when she stumbled. The bucket slipped from her hands, water splashing across the dusty ground. "Clumsy cow!" Pete shouted. "You wasted half the bucket." "I'm sorry, I just need a moment." "You need to learn your place." Cole strode over, his face twisted with anger fueled by whiskey and cruelty. "Get on your knees." "What?" "You heard me. On your knees. Crawl to the spring and bring back the water properly, like the animal you are." Ruth felt something inside her crack. "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. Cole's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with fury. "What did you say?" "I said no." Ruth straightened, despite her exhaustion. "I've hauled your water, cooked your food, done everything you demanded, but I won't crawl. I'm not an animal." "You'll do what I tell you, or what? You'll chain me up?" "Too late." Ruth laughed bitterly, holding up her manacled wrist. "You'll leave me in the desert? Go ahead. At least I'll die free of you." Cole's face turned purple with rage. He backhanded Ruth across the face, the blow sending her sprawling into the dust. "You don't talk back to me," he roared. "You're nothing. You're property. You're—" He raised his hand to strike her again, and Ruth curled into a ball, waiting for the blow. It never came. A voice, deep, rough, carrying absolute authority, cut through the camp like a knife. "Touch her again, and I'll break every bone in your hand." Everyone turned. A man stood at the edge of camp, apparently having approached so quietly that no one had noticed him. He was massive, nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders like a cliff face. His clothing was an unusual mix, buckskin pants and shirt, but also what looked like a military coat from the Mexican War, worn and faded, but still impressive. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but Ruth could see dark eyes that held no warmth. Most striking was the arsenal he carried. 2 revolvers on his hips, a rifle slung across his back, a bandolier of ammunition across his chest, and a large knife at his belt. He looked like he'd walked out of a war and hadn't bothered to leave it behind. "Who the hell are you?" Cole demanded, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. Something about this stranger was deeply unsettling. "Name's Isaiah Blackwood." The man's voice was gravelly, like he didn't use it often. "Ex-soldier, ex-scout, current bounty hunter and guide. Heard your camp from 2 miles off, lots of shouting and cruelty. Figured I'd investigate." "This isn't your business." "Maybe not, but I was raised to stand up when I see someone being mistreated." Isaiah's dark eyes moved to Ruth, still lying in the dust, chain glinting on her wrist. "Especially when that someone is chained like a prisoner. She owes us money. She owe you her freedom, her dignity." Isaiah stepped forward, and despite being one man against 4 armed cowboys, they all stepped back. "Because, from what I'm seeing, you've taken both. Look, stranger, you don't understand. I understand perfectly." Isaiah's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I understand 4 men who think they can abuse someone weaker because no one will stop them. I understand cowards who chain women because they're too pathetic to feel powerful any other way." Cole's hand moved toward his gun. Lightning fast, Isaiah's revolver was drawn and pointed directly at Cole's head. "Don't," Isaiah said quietly. "I've killed 17 men in the last 5 years, all bounties, all legal. I'd be happy to make you number 18, but I'd prefer not to waste a bullet on someone so worthless." The camp was frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. "Now," Isaiah continued, his gun never wavering, "you're going to unlock that chain. You're going to give the lady her belongings and any money you've stolen from her, and you're going to apologize." "Like hell!" Isaiah cocked the revolver. The click was deafeningly loud in the silent camp. "Or you can die right here. Your choice. Make it fast." Cole's face worked through several expressions: rage, humiliation, fear. Finally, fear won. With shaken hands, he pulled out the key and unlocked Ruth's chain. The moment the metal fell away from her wrist, Ruth felt like she could breathe again. Isaiah kept his gun trained on Cole while moving to help Ruth to her feet. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "Yes," Ruth managed. Thank you so." "Save it. We're not done here." Isaiah turned back to Cole. "Her belongings, now." Cole gestured sourly toward the wagon. Ruth gathered her small bundle, the carpet bag with her few spare clothes, her mother's Bible, a tin box containing exactly $3 in coins that Cole hadn't found. "That's everything she had?" Isaiah asked. "She paid $30 for passage," Mrs. Henderson called out suddenly, apparently finding her courage now that someone was standing up to the Cowboys. "They took it and then made up a debt she didn't owe." Isaiah's expression darkened further. $30. Give it back. "We don't have it." "You have it, or you have gold, or you have something. Give her $40, $30 for the passage, $10 for compensation for what you put her through." $40, that's... Isaiah fired his gun. The bullet kicked up dust 2 inches from Cole's boot. The cowboy jumped back with a yelp. $40 now! With shaking hands, Cole pulled out a leather pouch and counted out $40 in coins and bills. Isaiah made him place it in Ruth's hands directly. "Now apologize." "I'm sorry," Cole muttered, not meeting Ruth's eyes. "Louder, and mean it." "I'm sorry for how we treated you, Miss Brennan." The words came out forced but clear. "It was wrong." Isaiah looked at the other 3 cowboys. "All of you, apologize." One by one, they muttered apologies. When they finished, Isaiah nodded once. "Good. Now get on your horses and get out of here. Leave the wagon train. If I ever hear of you mistreating anyone else, I'll track you down personally, and I'm very good at tracking." The 4 cowboys didn't argue. They gathered their things hastily and rode out, disappearing into the desert darkness. Only after they were gone did Isaiah holster his revolver. He turned to the rest of the camp, his expression hard. "Any of you want to explain why you let this happen? Why you stood by while one of your own was abused?" Shamefaced silence. Mrs. Henderson finally spoke up. "We were afraid." "Fear is understandable. Cowardice is not. There's a difference between being unable to help and being unwilling to try." He looked around at all of them. "You should all be ashamed." He turned to Ruth. "You got anywhere to go? Anyone expecting you in California?" She shook her head. "No one. I was just hoping to find work." "Can you ride?" "Some." "Can you shoot?" "I've never tried." Isaiah considered her for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "I'm heading to a trading post 3 days north of here, Fort Defiance. It's near Navajo territory. I do some work as a translator and negotiator. Owner of the post is a woman named Sarah Crowfoot." She's always looking for help." He paused. "You can come with me if you want. I'll teach you to ride properly, to shoot, to defend yourself. By the time we reach Fort Defiance, you'll have skills and options, or you can stay with this wagon train and hope you reach California. Your choice." Ruth didn't hesitate. "I'll come with you." Something that might have been approval flickered in Isaiah's dark eyes. "Good. Get your things. We leave at first light." That night, Ruth slept without chains for the first time in 17 days. And when she woke before dawn, she found Isaiah already up, preparing 2 horses, a sturdy bay for himself and a gentle sorrel mare for her. "Her name's Patience," he said, gesturing to the mare. "Former cavalry horse. She's steady." As they rode out of camp, leaving the wagon train behind, Ruth looked back once. "Mrs." Henderson waved tentatively. Ruth didn't wave back. She faced forward instead, toward the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to rise, toward whatever came next. Isaiah Blackwood was unlike anyone Ruth had ever met. He spoke little, moved with economy of motion, and seemed constantly aware of everything around them, reading tracks, watching the horizon, listening to sounds Ruth couldn't identify. But when he did speak, he taught. On the first day, he showed her how to properly sit a horse for long-distance riding, how to read the animal's signals, how to care for the tack and equipment. On the second day, he taught her to shoot. They stopped in a rocky canyon where the sound wouldn't carry far, and he set up targets, tin cans and pieces of wood, at various distances. "First rule," he said, handing her his spare revolver, "respect the weapon. It's not a toy, it's a tool. Treat it accordingly." The gun was heavier than she expected. Isaiah showed her how to hold it properly, how to aim, how to control her breathing before firing. Her first shot went wild, missing the target by 3 feet. "Good," Isaiah said. "How is that good? I missed completely." "But you pulled the trigger. First time shooting, most people hesitate. You didn't." He adjusted her grip slightly. "Try again." By the time they ran out of daylight, Ruth had hit 5 out of 20 shots. It wasn't impressive, but Isaiah seemed satisfied. "You'll get better. Just takes practice." That evening, as they made camp, Ruth finally worked up courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why did you help me?" Isaiah was skinning a rabbit he'd shot earlier. He didn't look up. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because most people don't. Because people like me aren't worth—" "Stop." His voice was sharp. "Don't finish that sentence." He set down the knife and looked at her directly for the first time since they'd left the wagon train. "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully." Ruth nodded. "When I was young, maybe 22, 23, I was scouting for the Army down in Texas. We came across a wagon train that had been attacked by raiders. Most folks were dead, but there were survivors. 3 women, 2 children, and an old man." His voice was steady, but carried old pain. "The lieutenant in charge decided the old man was too much trouble to bring back. Said he'd slow us down. Wanted to leave him there to die. I argued, said it was wrong. But I was just a scout, low rank, no authority. So I followed orders." He returned to skinning the rabbit, his movements mechanical. "That old man died alone in the desert because I didn't have the courage to disobey an unjust order. I've regretted it every day for 15 years. "That wasn't your fault. It was my choice, and I chose wrong." He looked at her again. "So when I see someone being mistreated, I don't walk away. I don't make excuses. I act because I'm not that cowardly 22-year-old anymore. I'm a man who's learned that standing by while evil happens makes you part of the evil. Ruth felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for being strong enough to say no to them. That took courage. He resumed working. Most people never find that courage. On the third day, they encountered Navajo traders, 3 men on horseback who emerged from the rocky terrain seemingly out of nowhere. Ruth tensed, but Isaiah raised his hand in greeting and spoke in a language she didn't understand. The Navajo responded, and a conversation followed. After several minutes, one of the men handed Isaiah a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Isaiah handed over coins in return. After they departed, Ruth asked what they'd said. They were warning me about a group of raiders working this area, dangerous men. They suggested we take a longer route to Fort Defiance. He unwrapped the bundle to reveal dried meat and berries. And they sold me supplies. Navajo jerky is the best you'll ever taste. You speak their language? Learned it during my time as a scout. Languages come easy to me. I speak Navajo, Apache, some Comanche, Spanish, a bit of French. He shrugged. Useful skill in this territory. Why did you leave the army? Isaiah was quiet for a long time. Because I got tired of following unjust orders, tired of watching innocent people suffer because someone with more rank thought they were inconvenient. His jaw tightened. The last straw was when my unit was ordered to relocate a Navajo community from their ancestral land. Old people, children, didn't matter. We were supposed to force them out. What did you do? I deserted, took my rifle and disappeared into the mountains. Eventually became a bounty hunter. At least that way, the people I track are actual criminals. He glanced at her. Not innocent folks who just want to live in peace. Ruth understood something then. Isaiah carried guilt just as she carried shame. They were both people marked by pain, trying to survive in a harsh world. Maybe that's why he'd helped her, because he recognized a fellow survivor. They reached Fort Defiance late on the 4th day. It wasn't a military fort, but a trading post, a collection of sturdy buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade, positioned at the intersection of several trade routes. Sarah Crowfoot turned out to be a Navajo woman in her 40s, married to a French trader. She ran the post with efficient authority, managing a staff of a dozen people who handled everything from trading to meal preparation to equipment repair. Isaiah spoke with her privately for several minutes. Ruth watched nervously from the courtyard, wondering what was being said about her. Finally, Sarah approached her directly. Isaiah says you need work. He also says you're trustworthy, hard-working, and braver than you look. Her dark eyes were shrewd, but not unkind. I can offer you a job helping in the kitchen and managing supplies. Pay is $2 a week, plus room and board. Interested? Yes, Ruth said immediately. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. It's hard work, long hours. But you'll be treated fairly. Sarah paused. Isaiah also mentioned you had some trouble with men on the trail. Anyone here bothers you, you tell me immediately. I don't tolerate that behavior in my post. That evening, as Ruth settled into the small but clean room she'd been given, Isaiah stopped by to say goodbye. You're leaving? Ruth felt unexpected panic. Got a bounty to track. Man wanted for murder up in Colorado, but I'll be back through in a few months. Check on how you're doing. I don't know how to thank you, Ruth said, her voice thick with emotion. You saved my life. You saved your own life when you said no to those cowboys. I just cut the chains." He tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself, Ruth Brennan, and remember, you're worth more than anyone ever made you believe." He turned to leave, but Ruth called after him. "Isaiah, why did you really help me? The truth." He paused in the doorway, his large frame silhouetted against the evening light. "Because 17 days of hell should have been 0 days of hell. Because no one deserves to be chained and mocked for being who they are. And because—" He looked back at her, something vulnerable in his usually hard eyes. "Because I'm tired of seeing good people suffer while cruel people prosper. Had to do something to balance the scales." Then he was gone, disappearing into the desert darkness like a ghost. Ruth stood at her window, watching the stars emerge over Fort Defiance. Her wrist still bore marks from the chains, and her body still ached from weeks of abuse. But she was free. She had a job, a safe place to live, and $40 in her pocket. Most importantly, she had proof that not everyone in the world was cruel. That some people, rare people like Isaiah Blackwood, stood up when it mattered. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again, but she knew she'd never forget him. The mountain man who'd cut her chains and given her back her freedom.